Hawks at Bulls, Game 1, second round of the NBA playoffs, Monday. Who do you like and why?
Well, I like Chicago in this first game, RJ. And the Bulls, they've been sitting around. They're waiting. It's going to be almost a week. They closed up on Tuesday and waited for Atlanta to finish their series.
Wait, so let me do Tuesday to... all right, almost a week.
Almost a week. And situation being here with Atlanta, I think this first game, if Atlanta's going to come out flat, this is going to be the game for them.
You didn't listen to my podcast today, did you?
Boy, you know what? I guess I did not.
This is interesting. No, I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, this is a situation, and I'll admit, you know, the one series that gave me trouble during the first round was Orlando-Atlanta. I'll admit that up front. But I just think that Atlanta finally getting that monkey off their back. They won a big playoff series. They got their Achilles heel, the Orlando Magic, which is a team that's pounded them the last couple years. To get them and do away with them, they got to have that sense of, oh, okay, now, you know, in that first game after playing that series against Orlando, playing the rested Bulls, I just think they're going to come out a little bit flat. I think it's an advantage to Chicago in Game 1. I also think we're getting great line value here because the public is looking at this and saying Chicago was basically life and death in every game against Indiana except the last game, where Atlanta took care of Orlando in pretty good fashion. So I think the public's going to say if Chicago had trouble...
Hold on a second. Let's not talk about what the public's going to say. Let's see what the line is saying.
Well,
because it opened up 9.5, moved to 8.5 on all wise guy money. No, can promise you the squares aren't betting Monday's game. It's Friday, right? I don't know if you know that. It's Friday
it's
right
Friday,
now.
yeah.
So now the question is the value lost? But it strikes me, you know, it kind of brings up an interesting point. How did we do on our bets with the, we had our two bets about where the money was going to come. How'd you do? How many of those did you win?
I think we split, to be honest.
You think?
I think. I'm pretty sure.
So you don't know?
Yeah, I didn't go back and double check the second one, but the first one was right at we were like 51% or 52%.
Okay, and somehow you supposedly won that one.
Yeah, I think so.
How would you say that?
I just had to.
You just had a feeling it was going to go that way.
Yeah.
And the other one, how was that?
I actually didn't check the result on it, to be honest with you.
All right, so anyway. But
did you?
You know what's funny is I did, and then I did at the end. And that shows another reason why SPY, as we do our redesign for sportsbookspy.com, we're going to have archives in it so you can actually go back. But you know what's nice? There's a way you can actually get the archives that I just thought of. So we can do that. But anyway, let's get back to the key issue here. I actually felt the opposite on today's podcast. I felt like Game 1 was going to be an ideal time to back the Hawks. Now, losing the point of value, maybe not. But first thought was, I can't imagine that there's not a sense of possibility with the Hawks. Hey, we beat Orlando. The Bulls haven't won many playoff series as recently either. It feels like if there's ever, like the Lakers, they can let down because there's a time where they can get relaxed and say, we've been here before. But Atlanta, it seems like, especially in Game 1 now, if they get beat the first two games, maybe in Game 3, that team is a front-running team, I think. Emotionally, if their back's against the wall, I don't want to bet on them with their backs against the wall. But this is in the franchise history, they're probably feeling... not franchise history. In the last decade, they're probably feeling higher right now than any other time. And yeah, I'm sure at a certain point their balloon can be burst, but I don't think that they could possibly think now's the time to take the foot off the gas.
Well, they're not going to take the foot off the gas. And normally what you're saying, normally I would take the team that had the momentum and had to struggle and work to get to the next round in that first game, because I'd look and say the other team's been sitting around, they're rusty and so forth. But the difference is if Chicago would have went like 4 straight against Indiana, blew them out in all those games, I would be backing Atlanta in this first game. But because the complexion of that series was so tight, again, I always emphasize, I try to get into the
But
mind.
this idea that because we've been scared straight from taking it easy, wouldn't that assume then the Bulls would have won that last game? I mean, when it got to be where it was game, when they didn't have, Rose was hobbled, and I guess we were in game 5, right, at that point, wouldn't you have expected a dominating performance in that game?
And they did.
So
That's the only game that they dominated was game 5. They won the first 3, all close games in Indiana.
what was the final of game 5?
They won by close to 20 points.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
So I had a bad recollection on that. I guess, hey, well, let's take it from another direction. And maybe you're right here, and maybe there is no value, because it's hard to imagine laying the 8.5. It seems to me in a spot like this with an Atlanta team that's not a public team, you got to back Atlanta or you got to pass the game, I almost think. But, again, maybe not. What do you think about the fact that Chicago's having an emotional letdown to say, oh, the Hawks in round 2, that one's going to be easy? And that's something on today's podcast, and you can check that out at pregamepodcast.com. VR and I talked about that this was the first game felt like a natural letdown spot for the Bulls.
Well, see, I view it totally different. To me, I hear what you're saying. A lot of times teams, when the team that advances, your opponent advances, and it's not the one that you expected,
Exactly.
you can have a mental, hey, we
got lucky there.
But how can a team that struggled with the bottom seed take anybody for granted at this point? That was not a good series against Indiana, other than the last game. Indiana could have won every single ball game except the last one. That's where I'm hanging my hat. But, I will preface this by saying, as we started the video, Atlanta's caused me problems in the playoffs. It's the one series that I had problems with.
So how are you doing overall in the playoffs?
We're up, for our premium clients, we're up 3 units of profit right now for the playoffs. My free picks have been very good. We put out 2 picks. We didn't do any in studio this week, but I put out a play on Wednesday. We gave out Denver over the Thunder, which they covered, and then we gave out last night.
All right, so you're saying that your premium stuff's winning, your free picks are winning. Handicappers like catchphrases sometimes. Maybe what you should do is call your stuff gravy.
Gravy?
Just say, we got 3 units of gravy, baby. What do you think?
Oh, my God. You just thought of that, didn't you?
I did. I was just thinking, it's just gravy. Because it just fit, It's like, oh, we're pounding on the gravy tonight.
Another food reference?
Just consider that.
Just
okay?
consider, okay.
All right, well,
what's your catchphrase going to be?
I'll think on that one. I'm always thinking about you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll help you. I'll think of some, too.
Don't shake the table when you laugh.
Don't tell me not to, because then I'm going to do it more. All right. I like Chicago in game 1. 93-82. I think the Bulls come out, try to make a statement here, set the tone for this series. They've had a week to practice. I like them in this game.
I would say bet early. Where do you think the money's coming in?
Well, I mean, the wrench in this is the fact that, it opened 9.5 and it did jump down to 8.5. A lot of times you see people follow along late, the guys.
So maybe we should have another bet I'll take the Bulls are going to have over 50% of the action.
I would agree with you on that. I wouldn't bet that one because they're going to be the public.
All right, so you're saying play early then?
Play early because this will probably bounce back a half a point on game day.
Okay. So other than the psychology, which again is one of your strongest suits, any other factors?
No, not in this game. I mean, Chicago owned Atlanta, in 2 of the 3 games this year. So, matchup-wise, I think the one thing that Orlando wasn't able to exploit, they did a little bit at the tail end of the game last night, but Chicago is much better prepared to do that, is driving the lane and penetration. I think Rose will be able to attack them where Orlando found themselves too often settling for the outside shot or only having Dwight Howard inside. So
we explored 2 concepts. I'll reiterate them very quickly, and then you can check out the podcast if you're interested. One is the public, and I'll get your thoughts on both. The public tends to reset their opinion between series. So clearly Atlanta overperformed. And during the series, I think that people were buying into Atlanta, towards the end of that series beating Orlando. But the fact that once that series is over, people tend to revert their opinion back to where it was before the series and say, yeah, there was something about that. So maybe Orlando was overrated or whatever. But they revert back to, well, Atlanta is not much better than I thought they were entering that Orlando series. I don't get a real sense, especially with the number opening at 9.5, that the general public really has valued the Hawks significantly higher than before the Orlando series. And I think that idea of the reset between series is interesting, where if you really think you learned something in the prior series, it's probably not fully accounted for in the line.
See, I tend to disagree with that. I'm, again, the public now. Maybe,
Why is the line 9.5? What would the line of it? If this was the first round series, what would the first game have opened at?
If Chicago would have taken care of business the way they should.
No. First round.
Start of the playoffs.
What's the line in this game?
To me, the line would have been double digits. It would have been 10.
All right, so let's say it would have been 10. So it was 9.5.
And was immediately bet down.
Well, but what you're saying that the odds makers were trying to make a line to split the action. The wise guy said, oh, you're not accounting for that we've seen something in the Hawks that are different. And again, I mean, what was the first number in the first game of the Lakers-Hornets, 1 versus 8? That was like 9.5.
No, it was 10.5.
No, it was 10.5. All right. Okay. So Lakers versus Hornets, and now you've got the 4th seed here. It just doesn't feel like this. At 9.5, it doesn't feel like this line is taking into account the Hawks just beat the Magic.
To me, I think you've got to take each series on its own merit and look at how the complexion of those series went.
Well, true, there's going to be a handicapping element to these games, but I'm saying I don't feel... Well, let me ask you, how have you adjusted Atlanta in your power rankings? If I would have asked you, what is the line, or what is Atlanta's power ranking before the first series, and then I asked you the same question again right today, have they adjusted a half a point?
I definitely, to me, you've got to add a point to them because they played well and they played good in all of those games, except the one game in Orlando, and they took care of a higher seed.
And how do you adjust Chicago?
Based on what you saw in that game, the way they struggled with Indiana, you would have to take them down a little bit, and people would, to me, I feel that the public will look at Chicago and say, here's a young team that's still learning how to win.
Maybe we got ahead of ourselves, because I've psychologically had that thought about Chicago too. Maybe we've gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit here. So if that's the case, you're saying potentially 1.5 points of variation. You're saying you would have made the number 10 in round one, and it's 8.5. The key to me is it got to 8.5 from the wise guy saying this line's too high. So if it's too high at 9.5, can there really be great value laying the 8.5?
Well, it's why it's only a regular play. It's not one. I didn't bring a best bet with me today.
All right, give us your official projection.
93-82, Chicago by 11.
All right, I'm going to go neutral on this one. I actually would have probably leaned Atlanta, but you have kind of talked me out of that. And again, the old saying, a loser avoided is better than a winner.
He saved the
juice. Because you got to pay juice. All right, it's your turn to continue the conversation in the comments section. Next up, Marco and I are going to do a few short videos talking about some of the bigger news topics of the day in the world of sports.